You've been lied to about success. Not a little lie. A massive one. The kind that rewires your brain so deeply you don't even question it anymore. You wake up, you grind, you scroll past people who look like they've made it, and you feel that quiet pressure in your chest. Like you're behind. Like you're late. Like life is this giant race and someone forgot to give you the map. And here's the part that should make you stop mid-breath. The people who look the most successful, a lot of them are the most lost. And the thing you've been chasing this whole time might be the very thing keeping you stuck. If you like stories that hit a little too close to home, the kind that make you rethink how you live your life, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. Because today isn't about motivation. It's about waking up. And by the end of this story, you might never look at success the same way again. A few years ago, I met a guy named Daniel. Not famous. Not rich in the way Instagram teaches you to define rich. Just a normal guy. Mid-30s. Calm voice. The kind of presence that makes you feel like he knows something you don't. We met at a gym at 6012 in the morning. That weird hour where the world still feels half asleep. The lights were too bright, the music too quiet, and he was already there, stretching. No headphones, no phone, just present. At first, I didn't think much of it. But over the next few weeks, I noticed a pattern. Same time, same routine, same energy. While everyone else looked wired, stressed, or distracted, Daniel looked grounded. Like nothing was chasing him. Like he had all the time in the world. And that alone made him stand out in a room full of people trying to outrun something they couldn't name. One morning, I finally asked him. Not about workouts. Not about fitness. I asked him something simple. I said, "What do you do?" And he smiled. Not the fake kind, a real smile. The kind that takes a second to form because it's actually honest. And he said something that threw me off completely. He said, "I stopped chasing success a long time ago." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded insane. Like saying you stopped breathing. Or stopped needing money. Or stopped caring about your future. But he didn't laugh back. He just nodded like he expected that reaction. Like he'd seen it 100 times before. And then he said something even stranger. He said, "The moment I stopped chasing success, everything started working." Now at this point, I was hooked. Because that sentence doesn't make sense on the surface. It sounds like one of those vague quotes people post over a sunset. But the way he said it, there was weight behind it. Like he'd paid for that sentence with years of his life. So I asked him what happened. And that's when the story started unfolding. Daniel told me that in his 20s he did everything right. At least everything society told him was right. He chased the big job, the promotions, the recognition. He worked late, said yes to everything. Lived off caffeine and pressure. He optimized his mornings, tracked his habits, read every book with the word success in the title. He was obsessed with becoming someone, and it worked. On paper, he was winning. 6-figure salary before 30. Corner office. The kind of LinkedIn profile people screenshot for inspiration. But inside, he said it felt like slowly suffocating in a room full of applause. Every win gave him a high that lasted about a day. Then the silence came back. Louder than before. He told me there was this moment that still haunted him. One night, he got home after a 14-hour day. Dropped his keys on the counter, sat on the floor, and just stared at the wall. No TV, no music, just silence. And in that silence, a question showed up that he couldn't unhear. What if this is it? Not in a dramatic way. Not in a movie way. Just a quiet realization that maybe he had climbed the wrong mountain. That maybe success wasn't a destination. It was a treadmill. And no matter how fast he ran, the finish line kept moving. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because most people have that moment. Maybe not on a kitchen floor, maybe in traffic, or in the shower, or at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling. That whisper that says, "Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing?" And almost everyone does the same thing next. They ignore it. Daniel didn't. And that's where everything started to shift. He said the next morning, he didn't feel inspired. He didn't feel brave. He felt terrified. Because once you question the path you're on, you can't unquestion it. It's like seeing a crack in a wall. You can pretend it's not there, but you'll always know. So he did something small, not dramatic, not cinematic. He didn't quit his job. He didn't move to a cabin in the woods. He just stopped doing one thing. He stopped asking, "How do I get ahead?" And instead, he started asking a different question. What feels honest today? At first, it sounded stupid even to him. Too simple, too soft, but he tried it anyway. And that's when the weird stuff started happening. He noticed he worked differently, slower, but sharper. He stopped forcing conversations. Stopped pretending to care about things he didn't care about. He started saying no. Not loudly, not rebelliously, just quietly. And every time he did, something inside him got a little quieter too, like static fading from a radio. But here's the part he didn't expect. Nothing collapsed. His career didn't implode. His life didn't fall apart. In fact, some things got better. People trusted him more. Conversations got deeper. Work felt lighter. Not easy, just lighter. Like he wasn't dragging an invisible weight everywhere he went. And then came the moment that changed everything. A year later, the company restructured. Layoffs everywhere. Panic in the halls. People scrambling, networking, refreshing emails every 5 minutes. The kind of chaos that exposes what people are really made of. And Daniel, calm. Not because he was safe. He wasn't. His position was on the chopping block like everyone else. But he told me something that hit me like a punch. He said, "For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of losing the version of me I built." Let that sink in. Most people aren't afraid of losing their job. They're afraid of losing the identity attached to it. The title, the status, the proof that they matter. And when that's what you're protecting, you'll chase success forever. Because you're not chasing money. You're chasing validation. Daniel didn't realize it at the time, but that was the turning point. Not the layoffs, not the uncertainty, the realization that he wasn't clinging anymore. And here's where the twist comes in. He did lose the job, just like that. One meeting, 15 minutes, a polite smile, a handshake, and years of climbing gone. Now if this were a typical motivational story, this is where the montage starts. The comeback, the rise, the "I built $1 million company in my garage" moment. But that's not what happened. He went home, sat on the same floor where he'd once stared at the wall, and waited to feel panic, or regret, or anger, something. But what he felt instead was space. Not relief, not joy, just space. Like someone had opened a window in a room he didn't realize was suffocating him. And in that space, he did something most people never do. Nothing, no frantic job search, no immediate pivot, no desperate need to prove anything. He gave himself permission to not chase the next thing. And that decision confused everyone around him. Friends thought he was spiraling. Family thought he was in denial. But inside, he said it felt like the first honest breath he'd taken in years. Weeks passed. Then months. He started waking up without an alarm, going on long walks, cooking real meals, calling people he hadn't talked to in years. But because it was productive. But because it felt real. And slowly, something strange began to happen. Ideas showed up. Not forced ideas, not hustler ideas, just quiet nudges. He started helping a friend with a small project, then another. People began reaching out. Not because he was chasing opportunities, but because he was present enough to notice them. One day, he realized he was making money again. Not a lot, but enough. And it wasn't coming from a grand plan. It was coming from following what felt aligned instead of what looked impressive. That's when he told me the sentence I still think about. He said, "I spent years trying to build a life that looked successful. I never stopped to build one that felt true." And that's the part nobody talks about. Because chasing success is addictive. It gives you rules, metrics, scoreboards. It tells you exactly how to measure yourself. But truth is quiet. It doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. It asks harder questions. Questions like, if nobody could see your life, would you still want it? That question will mess with you. Because it strips away the audience. And without the audience, a lot of what we call ambition starts to look different. Here's the mind-bending part. Daniel didn't become less driven. He became more focused. But not on outcomes. On alignment. On integrity. On the feeling of being fully there in his own life, instead of watching himself from the outside like a character in someone else's story. And the wildest part, that's when real success started showing up. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. The kind that compounds quietly. He built work around things he actually cared about. He earned less at first, then more than before. But by then, the number didn't matter the same way, because he wasn't using it to prove anything anymore. When he told me all this, I remember standing there in that cold gym, the early morning light barely coming through the windows, and feeling this weird mix of inspiration and discomfort. Because a part of me knew he was right, and another part of me didn't want him to be. Because if he was right, it meant a lot of what we've been taught is upside down. It meant maybe the problem isn't that we're not working hard enough. Maybe it's that we're running in the wrong direction. Think about it. Most people spend their lives chasing milestones. The next level, the next badge, the next proof that they're finally enough. But the finish line keeps moving. Because the system isn't designed to let you arrive. It's designed to keep you chasing. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. That's the twist nobody warns you about. The real danger isn't failure. It's unconscious success. Waking up one day with everything you thought you wanted, and realizing you don't feel anything close to what you expected. And here's where the lesson hits hard. Stopping the chase doesn't mean giving up. It means changing the question. Instead of asking, "How do I win?" you start asking, "What's worth showing up for?" Instead of optimizing your image, you start honoring your experience. Instead of building a life to impress strangers, you start building one you can actually live inside. But let's be honest, that's scary. Because the moment you stop chasing, you lose the script. And without the script, you have to think for yourself. You have to feel for yourself. You have to define your own metrics, and that level of responsibility. Most people avoid it by staying busy. Business is the best hiding place in the world. It looks productive, it sounds ambitious. But sometimes, it's just fear in motion. Fear of slowing down long enough to hear what's really going on inside. Daniel told me something right before we finished that conversation. Something I didn't fully understand until much later. He said, "You don't find your life by chasing it. You find it by paying attention to what doesn't leave you alone." That line stuck with me. Because when you really think about it, the most important things in your life have always been quiet at first. The interests you couldn't explain. The ideas that kept coming back. The moments that felt different but you brushed them off because they didn't look impressive enough. What if those weren't distractions? What if those were directions? And what if the reason so many people feel lost isn't because they lack discipline, but because they've been trained to ignore themselves? That's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath all of this. You don't need more motivation. You might need more honesty. Honesty about what actually matters to you. Honesty about what you're pretending to care about. Honesty about the gap between the life you're performing and the life you're living. And once you start seeing that gap, everything changes. Not instantly, but irreversibly. You start noticing how often you say yes when you mean no. How often you compare paths that were never meant for you. How often you shrink parts of yourself just to fit into rooms that were never built with you in mind. And slowly, the chase starts to feel different. Not exciting, not noble, just loud. That's where the shift begins. Not in a dramatic breakthrough, not in a viral moment, in a quiet decision. The decision to stop outsourcing your definition of success, to stop measuring your worth with borrowed rulers, to stop running races you never consciously chose. And here's the paradox that makes this whole thing feel almost unreal. The less you chase, the more clarity you get. Because when you stop sprinting, you can finally see where you are. When you stop performing, you can finally hear yourself think. When you stop trying to become someone, you can finally meet who you already are. That's not a slogan. It's a shift in gravity. And once it happens, you start living differently. You still work hard. You still care. You still build. But it comes from a different place, not from lack, not from comparison, from alignment. And alignment has a strange kind of power. It makes ordinary days feel meaningful. It makes small wins feel rich. It makes progress feel grounded instead of frantic. You stop needing constant proof, because the experience itself starts to feel like enough. And that's the part most people don't believe until they feel it themselves. Because we've been trained to think fulfillment is waiting somewhere in the future. One more milestone away. One more breakthrough away. One more level away. But what if fulfillment isn't a place you arrive at? What if it's a way you move? A way you choose? Again and again. In small moments nobody claps for. That idea is both freeing and terrifying, because it puts the power back in your hands. And power without distraction can feel heavy at first. But it's also where life starts to feel real again. So if there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this. Success isn't something you catch. It's something you define. And if you never define it for yourself, the world will do it for you. Loudly, relentlessly, until you wake up chasing a finish line you never agreed to. And maybe the real move isn't to run faster. Maybe it's to stop, to look around, to ask yourself a question most people avoid their entire lives. If nobody was watching, what would I still care about? Sit with that. Don't rush it. Let it bother you a little. Let it follow you into quiet moments. Because the answer to that question, that's where your real life is hiding. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Be honest. What's one thing you've been chasing that doesn't feel as meaningful anymore? Drop it in the comments. Someone reading your words might realize they're not alone. And if this story hit you at the right time, share it with someone who's been running nonstop. Sometimes one conversation can change the direction of an entire life. And if you want more stories that make you pause, think, and maybe see the world a little differently, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell. Because the next one might be the one you didn't know you needed. Remember this. You don't need to chase a life that's already trying to meet you halfway.